Hello there. Today we're finally going to do the second part of my mastering chain overview. Last time we looked at the Manley New and the Universal Audio 2192, the two pieces of hardware that we talked about last time, the converter and compressor. This time we're going to look at the analog EQ that I've been using recently, and we're also going to check out some plugins that I use all the time. So let's just get right into it here. So this Manley Mini Massive EQ is something I added several months ago, and I've been really digging it so far. I think it's pretty flexible. So the main thing about this is I'm not using this EQ as like really precise movements most of the time. I think of it more as a broader frame around the song to kind of frame the tune. And so it's just a 2-band EQ. And in the back it also has a switch, so you can go without the transformer, with the transformer, and then it has a vintage mode. So usually I'll kind of start there with the transformer, and for most tunes so far I've used it without the transformer. It's very transparent, and that's generally what I go for, but recently I have used the iron option, the transformer, a couple times, and I've even used the vintage mode one time, but only one time, because it's pretty not subtle in my opinion, but it can be cool on the right thing. So once I kind of decide that, then I'll move to the two bands, the low frequency and the high frequency, and you can choose, of course, boost and cut, and you can choose shelf or bell for both of those, the low frequency and the high frequency band. And the bell shape does exactly what you think. If you're boosting, it creates a bell around that frequency that you choose, and you can take the bandwidth knob and choose how wide that bell is or how narrow the bell is. Where this EQ gets really interesting is with the shelf option, because as you turn the bandwidth knob on the shelf option, it does something that's very similar to a Pultec EQ. And so we're going to draw that out and see if we can kind of identify what that's doing a little bit, because it's pretty unique. So I'm going to grab a piece of paper and a pen, and we're just going to draw out what the shelf EQ is doing as you turn the bandwidth knob. So with a regular shelf, you get something that looks like this. I'll draw it out here. This is your frequency range. If you did a shelf, it's just going to make a little shelf, right? There's your boost. Now as you turn the bandwidth knob up on the Mini Massive, it'll begin to do something like this the sharper you go. So if you go very sharp, you'll actually get a dip and then a boost. So you can get a lot of tonal variety here. Now if you were to use both the low frequency and the high frequency bands doing that Pultec style EQ shelf, you could do a lot of things and have a lot of flexibility. So, down in the low end, you could have a dip going, here, while it creates a huge boost in your super low end, and then in the high end, maybe you do a slight dip and then boost. So that's why I think of this EQ as kind of a general tonal shaper and not so much something that I use for precision. You can do that too, for sure. I've used the low end to just do a small bell curve at 68 hertz or whatever 68 is the setting, So I think of this EQ as a broad tonal shaper, combined with, again, kind of the broadness of the New. So these are kind of I start with those generally as like here's kind of what these broad moves are gonna do to the song as a whole, and then I move to kind of the smaller moves, unless something needs to be fixed first. Then I'll try to fix that, and then go to the broad moves. Maybe my strategy will change over time. It already has, of course, as I continue to learn more and more about this whole deal. But that's what I'm doing right now. So let's move and look at some of the plugins that I often use when mastering a song. Number one is Pro Q3. The Fabfilter Pro Q3, everyone seems to use this these days, and for good reason. It sounds really good. I'm usually in natural phase mode, and there's just about anything you can do with this EQ that you've ever wanted to do. You can make it a dynamic EQ so that this is reacting to the music. You can do any shape you want, stereo placement, mid-side is super helpful. It's just the most flexible EQ, really. Occasionally I'll use the multi-band compressor, but only occasionally. I'm not a huge multi-band compression user at the moment, but that could change. Sticking with Fabfilter Pro C2, their compressor is very flexible. This is kind of, if I need more compression other than the new Mu, I'll most likely use this. And Soothe 2, I just started using this on a couple projects recently, and it's pretty easy to overdo it, so that's something to watch out for if you grab this plugin, but it is really helpful at taming certain harsh things. I'll use this SPL iron compressor occasionally. It's got some similarities, I think, to the new Mu. It does have a lot of options here where you can choose the rectifier. That can be pretty interesting. The airbase setting I hardly ever use, but it is really fun. And, it's got a few of these handy things, like the high pass side chain. Something else I use quite a bit is the black box. This is a pretty cool tonal shaper, and I use it most often in mid-side, I would say, so that you can choose, what saturation, how much saturation you want for just the mid channel and just the side channel. It's really pretty cool, all the things you can do. And then beyond mid-side, I really like this here that you can choose, where you're kind of choosing how you want that saturation to respond. So if you leave it flat, you can add more saturation to the whole frequency spectrum, but then you can choose a high pass, low pass, band pass, and band stop. It's really super flexible, so I'll often use that in mid-side. And the limiter I use, I pretty much always stick with Fabfilter Pro L2. It's a great limiter. The different styles are really helpful. Oversampling pretty much stays on, either 8x most of the time. And the thing that people often don't totally use to its advantage on this is the attack and release. I'll link a video that has a great explanation of the attack and release from another channel. It's a fantastic video. If you're using Pro L2, go watch that video, because I think this is a often misunderstood part of this limiter. So those are the plugins I'm generally using in combination with the analog gear. I think the main thing I want to get across here is when we make music, I've found it really helpful to kind of think in two ways. Think in what ways do I need to be critical about specifics, and often I'm using plugins for that. And then in what ways do I get to think broader in how the song as a whole is going to be framed in. And so that's kind of been helping me both in mastering and just in kind of creativity in general. I try to think, in what ways do I want to be analytical and specific, and in what ways do I want to be thinking broader. So I know that's kind of a general idea, but I've still found that really helpful, and every time I think about that for a project, it generally seems to inspire something along the way that I will use next time in a new way. Thanks for watching. If you have anything you would like to see on this channel, please let me know. I honestly am really bad at making videos. So if there's anything that would seem interesting that maybe I didn't touch on, just let me know, and I'll try to do something about that.